Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show, coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska, where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Thank you, Scott. Welcome aboard, everybody, to Must Read Alaska, coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. Before we get started, if you like this podcast, please give us a 5-star review. We really appreciate it. We want to hear from you, and it helps us get better when you give us feedback. And also, be sure to like us on Facebook and also on Parler, where we are now. And we're at Must Read Alaska on Facebook, Parler, Twitter, all the others as well. I'm Suzanne Downing. My co-host John Quick is on the other mic. Scott is on the soundboard, and you can hear him on Wednesdays, on the Wednesday edition of the Must Read Alaska show, where Scott is hosting it by himself, which we really appreciate. And Scott, you're doing a fantastic job. This Wednesday podcast you're doing is just well worth listening to. I enjoy it greatly. So, John, tell me what's going on the Kenai Peninsula this week.
Hello, Suzanne. John Quick here. I'm out on the Kenai Peninsula in the great unincorporated city of Nikiski. And not too much going on here. We do have some scuttlebutt as it relates to hockey coming up. As we all know, if you have hockey kids, it's just getting reared up for hockey season. And the big news here on the peninsula is the city of Soldotna decided to shut down the Soldotna Sports Complex because of COVID. And
so isn't that kind of like shutting down church out there on the Kenai?
It is. It's a big deal for us. Hockey is a big deal. Our family, we have a rink that we make at my wife's parents' house every winter. I mean, my wife's dad makes, so I don't want to take any credit for it. And lots of people have these kind of homemade rinks, and there's lakes out here everywhere. But the couple of sports complexes that we have on the peninsula are a big deal. All of the major hockey teams play at these sports complexes, and it was not well received when the city of Soldotna decided to shut down the sports complex. I think there's going to be a lot of backlash from the organized hockey mom and dads out there, and I would encourage them to get organized because kids should be out there playing hockey. There's no reason that you can't social distance and do those types of things and still have hockey open.
I'm just curious, why did they shut them down again? Was this relates to the governor's health mandates or orders or whatever?
Yeah, I think the city of Kenai initially shut theirs down because the governor did that emergency health alert, and they kind of backpedaled, and I think they're opening theirs up again. But the city of Soldotna has kind of stuck to it's going to be shut down, and I think it's a knee-jerk reaction. I think that there's things that you can do that will, prevent it, whether you got to wear a mask, right? I think parents would be more than happy going to the sports complex if they had to wear a mask rather than having it shut down. And the city council of the city of Soldotna just kind of missed the mark on this one.
So let's talk about these emergency orders and what happened on the Alaska Emergency Broadcast Network last week when the governor used the broadcast system to send out an emergency alert. How did that get received down there on the Kenai?
It wasn't too well. I think, it's one of those things where I think people look at it and they think, okay, you're going to use an emergency alert system historically on the peninsula for tsunamis, because we get these tsunami warnings, I would say, a couple times a year from earthquakes out in the Aleutian chains that, are going to trigger a tsunami. And so we're kind of used to these alert systems. The sirens sound in places like Homer and Seward and Hope, where literally people are running for the hills and evacuating the cities. And I've been when I was chief of staff for the Kenai Peninsula Borough, we had times where people in Seward literally had to get out of Seward or go up on the hill. And so I think that using the emergency alert system to remind people to wash their hands and or wear a mask and or socially distance was probably not a great use of it, because what you had kids that have phones, right? 11, 10, 12, 13-year-old kids who have phones, and they get this emergency alert and they freak out. I mean, they don't know how to deal with this kind of stuff. They think that, there's a zombie plague coming, and that if they don't go get in a bubble, that they could be susceptible to becoming the next zombie. And so I think it probably had good intentions, but was just not well received.
Well, let's talk about these emergency orders that the governor came up with. So these were orders that came effective November 16th, and he issued them Friday, and basically saying we're no longer in a mandate scenario. These are now orders, because he's got a new emergency order in place, and so it's not the same as the one that he's had under legislative authority. But this one basically continues a lot of the things he had before. It suspends a lot of regulations. Basically, it peels back regulations so that people can respond appropriately to the need. And most of these are fine. I mean, really, regulations that say that you have to go in person to get your driver's license renewed, things like that are relaxed. Things like telehealth. Telehealth's a big deal. Telehealth, you can't do telehealth if with a Medicaid patient, for instance. But now you can, because the regulations have been rolled back. Occupational licenses, same thing with that. Virtual meetings for boards of directors, you can't do that under law because banking and other kinds of laws govern that. But now you can have a board or a corporate bank meeting via Zoom. Also, it allows the state to receive FEMA money and use it for shelters and quarantine scenarios when it's needed, if needed. And they probably will be needed, considering we do have a lot of cases right now. And he also issued guidelines for intrastate travel, and intrastate travel. So basically, he told people that if they're coming into Anchorage, they need to get tested before they go back to their villages, because what's happening is people are coming into town where there's a lot of COVID in the city because, of course, urban area, and then they go back to the village and they spread it around back there. So he's trying to contain that out in the villages, because if you get real sick out there, you're going to be stuck. It's real hard to move people around, and there are a limited number of beds. So, most of these make a lot of sense. And he never said a mask mandate. And so I really don't have a hard time with any of this. It's 30 days. That's what he's got to do this with. And I don't know if he could continue by having another executive order, maybe, but it gets a little dicey. So
yeah, I think some of it's just in how you communicate it. So I think that, I'm the average Joe living in Kenai. If he would have came out and said, hey guys, I'm going to do an emergency declaration. It's actually going to roll back regulations. It's going to help you streamline your healthcare, because I know everybody that can't show up to appointments. It's going to help villages out be able, to kind of quarantine if they need to do that. If he would have led with that, as opposed to emergency alert, oh crap, COVID's here, and case numbers and this and that. I think it's all about delivery. And I think if it would have been delivered of, this is actually going to be less regulations. It's going to help with reimbursements of FEMA. It's going to do those types of things. Then I think it's well received. I think if it's a 12-year-old kid getting an emergency alert thinking that the zombie apocalypse is coming, it's going to be not well received 7 days a week.
So let's talk about, I think you're spot on, by the way. Let's talk about Senator Laura Reinhold and her little episode with the Alaska Airlines. So she gets on the plane and she takes off her mask and then she starts eating or something, but she doesn't really put her mask on. And a passenger nearby tells the flight attendants that this lady next to her is not wearing her mask. And so then all the flight attendants come back and they kind of gather around her, and she's probably getting a little lippy with them, and they're starting to give her a real stink eye. She takes a picture of them, right? And then she posted on the internet, she posted on Facebook with a long rambling tirade about why they're being mask Nazis and stuff. And she posts the picture of all three of the flight attendants. They were in their masks, but you could see their eyes were looking at her like, oh my gosh, lady, you're this close to getting thrown off this plane. And, I got to say that I think masks are inappropriate in a lot of places. Like if you're out in the wilderness, not needed unless you just want to wear a face jacket, quite honestly. But when you're on a plane, it's close quarters. And if the airplane pilot and the company says they want you to wear a mask on their plane, guess what? It's their rules. That's federally mandated. They get to make rules. The captain is the captain of his plane, her plane. And so she apparently just doesn't want to follow the rules of Alaska Airlines, and pretty upset about it. What are you reading? What are you seeing on Facebook about this?
on the World Wide Web. Well, it's funny. It's like, I don't personally wear a mask because I've talked to my doctor and he said it's basically a bunch of nonsense. And so, but like, for example, I went shopping in Anchorage a couple of weeks ago, went to the malls, and I'm basically the only person in the whole of Anchorage not wearing a mask anywhere. But if I go to the Gap and the Gap tells me, hey, listen, you're not wearing a mask, you need to wear a mask in here, I'm just going to leave because I'm on somebody else's property. And, I've kind of went as far as I can with no mask. And if I'm in their store and they're saying, don't wear a mask, my personality is I'm just not going to fight that because they've already asked me with their signs to wear a mask and I've said no. So I think that there's kind of two parties on the Facebook that are talking about this. One is, I think that Senator Laura is very spunky and sparky and people like that. I think that she can be combative in the right ways to force government to potentially think about things differently. And I think that is an aspect of her that people really like. And then I think you have this whole crowd of wear a mask at all costs that has jumped on the bandwagon with her Facebook posts and said, basically, you're a horrible person for not wearing a mask. And I just think it's a simple thing that if I'm going to go fly, it's probably one of the only times I would wear a mask, because if I'm going to Hawaii, it's worth it just to shut up and wear a mask to get to Hawaii or whatever. I don't agree with wearing a mask in that situation. I'm not really going to wear a mask anywhere else, except for the fact that I'm on somebody else's plane. If I don't want to abide by those rules, then I should just get off the plane.
That's right. You could swim to Hawaii. It's no big.
Yeah.
So, I was in the Fifth Avenue Mall in Anchorage on Saturday, and I went to the Apple store to pick something up and had to stand in line there. And they've got a really unusual scenario there where you just go up to a window and they have the whole store is blocked off. You go to the window and you pick up your item that you've ordered. And I was wearing my neck gaiter for a mask, which I typically do so that I could just sort of shake it off when I get out of the building. And there were like two guards in front of the Apple store, two guards. And one of them said, do you mind putting on this other mask? And it was a surgical mask. And I was like, no, I really don't mind, whatever, if it makes y'all happy. So I didn't give him that look, but I did put it on and stood there and waited until I got my item. And then as I left, I took off the surgical mask and I put my little face gaiter on and I left. But it's not enough that you wear any mask now. Now we're getting a little bit more specific. We don't want you to wear this kind of mask. You have to wear that kind of mask. So they're getting more and more strident about it. And it's just kind of interesting to watch. But Laura Reinhold, when the only thing is that I don't like is when you mix it up with people who are in the workforce and they are kind of on the front lines, people in the grocery stores, they don't make the rules. They're just enforcing the rules. And it is up to them to enforce the rules or they can lose their job. So I don't like disrespecting people in the workplace. I think when you start taking pictures of people and posting them like that, and then calling them out and using your authority as a senator, I think you really want to be more careful about using your authority that way. It's just not advisable. That's my only point.
And you could, I always look at it as if I didn't agree with Apple's stance, me personally, then I don't have to shop there, right? No. And I don't have to spend money there. If I don't want to go into their store and wear a mask, then you have a choice to buy your stuff online. But I think she's consistently raising the mask point, which I do appreciate, even though I may not agree with the delivery. I really do appreciate her stance on asking the question continuously, why are we wearing a mask and does it actually work? And people may not like her delivery, but she's been very consistent in that we should not just do things because the government tells us to. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, I do too, actually. Perfectly legitimate. Hey, by the way, I forgot to ask you about something. I saw a picture of you the other day with Donald Trump. And there you are. You're sitting in the front row in a fairly small room. Nobody's wearing masks. You're there. Donald Trump is there. Looked like Connie, who was that? Secretary of Transportation. What were you doing in D.C.?
Elaine Chao, I think I'm pronouncing her name right.
Elaine Chao, yeah.
So I got asked the President Trump invited folks from California, Washington, Alaska he called it Leaders from the Northwest or something out. He invited us, and I went out there not really expecting what's going to happen. And it was kind of a week's worth of stuff where he let us talk to people that were in his cabinet, or we could set up any meetings we wanted with any folks in his, plethora of entourage that he had. And one of the crescendo meeting was a meeting with him, and, like a, small room and whatever. So I go into this room and I'm not knowing what to expect. I mean, we go through, 6 different gauntlets and pat downs and making sure we're not, we're all safe and all that kind of stuff. And I look, and there's a front row available. So I'm like, sweet, I'm going to sit in the front row. I want to be as close to Donald J. Trump as possible. And so I sit down in the front row, and probably like 5 minutes after the meeting started, people come and sit by me. And I'm thinking, I wonder why nobody sat here in the first place. Well, then I noticed there's a reserve sign on the front row that says reserved for cabinet members only. And I'm sitting there front row, sitting next to Elaine Chao, who's the Secretary of Transportation. And to be honest, I didn't know who she was. I'm just being completely honest. I didn't know who.
You're just a hick from Nikiski.
I'm just from Nikiski. And so I'm chatting it up with her, and we're telling funny stories. I told her a story about a time I made a beach in Florida evacuate because I thought there was a shark attacking swimmers, and it turned out to be a dolphin. And so we're just having a good old time, laughing it up. And I realized, I'm like, oh crap, I'm like in the cabinet member seat. And so I'm like, okay, I need to move. And so I kind of get up to move, and she grabs my arm and she goes, no, you're staying here. You're hilarious. You're one of us now. And so I got to sit down and chat with all them. And Donald Trump, there was a room filled with Democrats and Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
And he commanded the room. I mean, he was hilarious. He was on point. He would have people, wherever they live, say, hey, what's an issue in your town? And people would raise their hand and say, hey, I'm having an issue getting water. This guy in California, I'm having an issue getting water. He owns something, crazy amount of, 20,000 acres or something like that. And so he would pull out his secretary, whoever was in charge of getting water, and he would literally solve the problem right there. He would take the guy out of the audience, have him go with his cabinet guy to some other room, and they would go fix the problem right then and there. And it just showed me that, Donald Trump's a guy of action, and didn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, everybody in that room was laughing.
Wow.
He was a funny guy.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really great story. Well, that's one for the grandkids, I got to tell you. So let's talk a little bit about Don Young, by the way. A few days ago, Don Young came down with a little touch of COVID. And of course, he's 87 years old, so that's nothing to sneeze off. And then he kind of went quiet, and his staff went quiet, and the media went nuts. They were just going nuts. It's like they wanted to station a reporter in his room with him to make sure he was still breathing or not breathing. And we were starting to read over the weekend how reporters were really annoyed because they said everybody had a right to know how he's doing. I'm not really sure what their right is to know at every given moment of how he's doing, but there was an extended period of silence from his office and from his campaign. Well, other members of his office and of his campaign also ended up with COVID because apparently a number of them caught it on or around election night. They were with each other constantly the last 48 hours before the election. And election night, they were all together until like 3 a.m. And then the next night they had a volunteer party, and they stayed together for several hours. So a number of them got it, but and finally this morning, Don Young just sent out a press release that said that he had been in the hospital over the weekend at Providence, and that he's feeling better, and he's back at home, and he's well on the way to recovery. And then he said, unfortunately, a lot of what you may have heard about my condition was based on speculation in the media that did not respect my privacy. This is irresponsible, and I do not want any Alaskans to be scared of seeking testing or treatment out of privacy concerns. So basically, you had people hounding the hospital and hounding the nurses. And I believe that there might have been a leak to the media that he was in the hospital, because I also heard that he was in the hospital. And I heard another rumor out there that he was not only in the hospital, but that he was dead. There was actually a rumor floating around out there in Alaska that he was dead. And so, and I knew he wasn't dead, but as he said, it was kind of irresponsible. And what we really want everybody to do is just take care of yourself. Wash your hands, keep your distance from people. If you feel comfortable wearing a mask, wear a mask. I wear a mask when I'm out in the public arena there. And also, don't touch your face, and do the things that you need to do. Zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D. You just want to do the right thing. But like he said, you can't hunker down forever, but we shouldn't be afraid of this thing. And I thought it was very interesting that he called out the media for its irresponsibility. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think the media should be ashamed of themselves in this scenario, because even now, like on the Kenai Peninsula, for example, the radio ads around this story, or the news around this story is, well, we told you so, Don Young. You said this virus was the beer virus and this and that. And it's almost like they're happy that he got it, because he downplayed it a little bit as just, he didn't want it to. I personally think he didn't want he didn't want the economy to shut down. He didn't want to have huge mandates that force people to wear masks when their doctor said they didn't need to. He didn't want to have things that made it so workers couldn't work. And so this is like, the media is like, well, we told you so. Now he's got the virus. What do you say about this? And the news story, I'm sure it's like this all around the state. If I'm hearing it on the Kenai Peninsula, in the Kenai Peninsula, is, well, Don Young said this virus wasn't a big deal, and it was the beer virus and this and that, and now he's got it. And it's almost like, this is where Republicans are awesome, because we take the high road 9 times out of 10. Like, we would never wish the virus on Mark Begich. We would never wish the virus on Berkowitz. We would never wish this on somebody. And it's like the media just loves it that he has the virus finally. And I think it just goes to show that the cold-heartedness of the mainstream media, and the reason why your numbers keep tanking, because people are sick and tired of your negative nonsense. And that's what I think about it.
Well, tell us what you really think. Seriously. So, I think Don Young's going to be fine. Obviously, at his age, it probably takes him a little longer to recover, but he's got good medical care, and Providence really took good care of him. And we'll keep everybody updated when we hear more. I'm sure that by next week I'll have spoken to him, and I'll give you an update about that. So let's talk about a little bit about this this story that came out today about how the chief of staff for Lisa Murkowski is leaving her office in DC and returning to Alaska. And that is Mike Pulowski. His nickname is Fish. His nickname is Fish because he likes to fish. And he worked in the Parnell administration, and he worked he was one of the architects of SB 21, the oil and gas tax structure. And he has been over there in DC working for Lisa Murkowski for about 5 years. He started on her energy committee, then became her chief of staff. And now he's coming back, and he's forming up a partnership with longtime lobbyist Jerry Mackey. And they are starting their own lobbying group, which is interesting, because you would think, well, maybe he's just doesn't want to work for Lisa anymore. But what we're hearing is that he's going to be very, very active in her reelection campaign. So he is not parting ways with her on poor terms. He's just, parting ways so that he can go back to Alaska, live in Alaska, and, take clients, and he's going to be a lobbyist. So.
And this guy's very sharp. This is a very well politically astute guy that's figured out how to. If there's anybody in the Senate that has to toe the line of having Democrat followers and Republican followers, it's Lisa Murkowski, and he's had to be the manager of that for 5 years or however long he's been the chief of staff. And this is something to where I wish the Republicans would just get a little more organized, because the Democrats are already or the other side, or whoever you want to call it, they're already figuring out a way to organize to get a lobbyist group in Alaska to spearhead the Lisa Murkowski Senate race from, an independent expenditure standpoint to make sure that she can win. And, we're sitting here worrying about, I didn't like it when I had to wear a mask. And, the other side's already figuring out how to win the Senate seat in 2 years and how to do this in 5 years. And we're just here getting butthurt over the fact that people might have to wear a mask.
Well, so Jerry Mackey, it was a Democrat when he was served in the state House of Representatives, and then he switched and became a Republican, and he was in the Senate. He's from Ketchikan. He was raised in Craig, Alaska. He's a Haida Native Alaska Indian, and he is been a longtime lobbyist, and he's just known to be super bipartisan. He's almost the perfect person to really interface with Lisa Murkowski in many ways. And then Pawlowski has got really good conservative chops, but he has had to actually manage her, the senator from Alaska, for 3 of these Supreme Court confirmations. And that had to have been hard because she was always on the edge, and she was sort of the drama queen of all 3 of those Supreme Court confirmations that Trump had. So we'll see fish back here in Alaska. And I think that what they are looking at is, now that ballot measure 2 has passed, it's going to be a lot easier to get Lisa reelected, because in this state, she could not win a Republican primary. She knew it. Republicans knew it. It was a big problem. But now she'll be going into an open primary in 2022, and she will face a ballot full of other people, but most certainly she will make it through that ballot and get to the general election, and there'll be 2 or 3 people on that general election ballot, and she will compete well, because quite honestly, most of the voters in Alaska are actually undeclared, and they don't mind her. She knows who her voters are, so I think she's in a pretty good position to be reelected. I'm trying to think of who could win against her in a primary or a general election. It'll be very, very hard for the Democrats to find somebody to run against her. Who are they going to put up there? Ethan Berkowitz? I don't think so. I think he's pretty much done. Bill Wielechowski, Senator Wielechowski, going up against Lisa Murkowski, I don't think he can do it. So you think about what they've got to put up against her, and I don't think it's much. So quite honestly, the Republicans who might be interested in taking her on will have a much tougher time, because she appeals to the middle. And most Alaskans at this point are kind of in the middle. So we'll see what happens with that. But, speaking of which, Mike Pawlowski's not the only chief of staff who's leaving in DC. Pam Day, who's the chief of staff for Don Young, is also leaving. She's leaving this month. And she's been with him for many, many years, about 15 years or so. She is the most senior chief of staff in the House of Representatives. And I think she's just going to take some time off. She's just been doing it for so long. And then Alex Ortiz from Alaska is taking over. He was born and raised in Ketchikan, and he's taking over as chief of staff for Don Young. And so some changes happening in at least 2 of our 3 congressional offices. But let's talk a little bit about Must Read Alaska and where people can find us besides here in this podcast, which we appreciate people listening to. John, you are kind of the expert on all of our social media platforms. Talk to people about where we're at these days and what's going on with this new legislative newsletter we're putting out.
So as Facebook gets more and more and it censors folks like us, like Must Read Alaska or other conservative news sites out there, we see that that's coming down the pipeline. It's already come down the pipeline. They're going to be, especially if Biden gets elected, there's going to be more and more and more censorship, especially on Facebook and Twitter. And so what we've recognized is, we need to have a plan that's going to be able to reach our folks in a way that's going to be the least censored option out there. And so we've actually done a partnership with Caucus Room. So if you go to the www.caucusroom.com, you can type in Must Read Alaska and find us. And that's a great place where conservatives share ideas. And it's in my opinion, going to be a place where you're not going to have to worry about being censored. A couple of the more mainstream places that we're on is Parler and me, we, and really all you got to do is type in Must Read Alaska and you can find us there. And I can say that we're adding folks. We can't, it's hard to keep up sometimes because we have to manually add them on MeWe. And so we're literally on there every day, adding 20, 30, 40, 50 people every day manually. And so if we haven't added you yet, just know that we'll get to you. We just have to do it by hand each time. And then we also are going to be doing something brand new this season. We're going to do a legislative newsletter, if you will. Every day we're going to be coming to you with what is happening in the legislature this season. I think it's you would know what number, what round this is. Is it
30? Yeah, I'm gonna look it up. Yeah, 30 seconds, something like that. Yeah, 30 seconds.
So the 30-second round here, and every day we're gonna be honed in specifically on what bills they talked about, what bills passed, what bills have a potential of passing, what are some of the inside scoops that are happening, what's some of the drama that's happening, and you're only gonna find this here. And as you know, we have a conservative viewpoint, a truthful viewpoint, and so that's the lens that you're going to be getting this news from. Nowhere else in Alaska are you going to be able to get this on a daily basis. So if you're interested in getting this, you just go to clubmrak.com and you can sign up for the newsletter there. We already have hundreds of people signed up so far, and it's pretty exciting. We have some of the who's who on that newsletter that have signed up already. And I think there's some good buzz about it. And, we're going to be putting a lot of work towards this. So we want to encourage you to take part in it.
Oh, it's going to be great. It's exciting. Of course, we already have the Monday, Wednesday, Friday edition of the Must Read Alaska newsletter. So this is something that's different. This is Club MRAK, Club MRAK. And what it is a newsletter just on legislative issues. What happened the day before, what's coming up this day. So it'll be a bulletin. It'll be like your morning coffee. You just grab your cup of coffee and you can look through this. It'll be like bullet points. So it'll be really easy to get caught up on what's going on, what to watch in the legislature. And we're putting it together for people who are really keen on watching how the budget rolls out, what's going on with oil and gas, what's going on with COVID legislation, hot topics. So super excited about it. And I'm really encouraging everybody to subscribe to it. It is free. All of our stuff is free, and we just, we'll find a way to pay for it. Our supporters are extremely generous, and we really appreciate all of you. But saying that, we know that we're kind of up against the clock here. And I just want to tell you, I love working with you, John and Scott. You're doing a great job as well. I've got a great team here at Must Read Alaska. And if you're a supporter out there of Must Read Alaska, thank you so much. This makes it all possible. And if you'd like to support the conservative side of the news, please be one of the donors. It's right there on the right-hand side of mustreadalaska.com. You can just hit the button. It takes you to PayPal. So it supports us. It helps us keep standing strong against the big blue tide of liberal media. And we are fighting that every day. Till next week, we're signing off from somewhere in Alaska. See you next week, right here on the Must Read Alaska show. Take it away, Scott.